To really get a feel for this trap, let's use a super clear example. Let's just imagine someone has a phobia. They are terrified of snakes. Now, according to behaviorism, we should be able to define that fear using only their behavior.
Now, a super important philosopher on this, Gilbert Ryle, he added a pretty smart twist. He said, look, it's not just about what you're doing right this second. It's about your dispositions. Basically, your tendencies to act in certain ways if a certain situation comes up. So being afraid of snakes isn't literally just running away right now. It's the tendency to run away if you happen to see one. That makes it a little more flexible.
But can you really just swap out an internal feeling, like fear of snakes, for a simple description of behavior, like a tendency to run from snakes? The behaviorists were pretty confident you could. But a huge problem pops up.
Your action, running away, it isn't caused by just one mental thing. Think about it. Your fear of snakes only makes you run if you also believe this particular snake is dangerous. I mean, if you thought it was just a rubber toy, you wouldn't run, right? And you also have to want to escape. What if you were trying to be brave? You might just stand your ground. So the final behavior isn't just one thing. It's the result of this whole cocktail of different mental states all mixed together.
The whole point of behaviorism is to define every single mental state just by looking at behavior, without ever having to mention any other mental states. But as we just saw with the snake, that's starting to look kind of impossible.
Let's just break this down nice and slow. Let's say we try to define fear by the action of running away. Well, we can't just stop there, can we? We have to add a little fine print, as long as you also believe the snake is dangerous. Uh-oh, see what happened? To define fear, we had to bring in another mental state, belief. We're already in deep trouble here.
Okay, you might say. So what? Let's just define belief using behavior too. But just watch what happens when we try. To define the belief that a snake is dangerous, what behavior would we point to? Well, probably the tendency to run away. But wait, that only makes sense if the person also fears snakes. Are you seeing it now? It's a perfect loop. To define fear, you need belief. But to define belief, you need fear. You're completely trapped in the very circle of mental states that behaviorism was supposed to get us out of. Uh-oh, this is a big problem. One of the most famous behaviorists, a guy named Carl Hempel, tried really hard to find a way out of this circle.
He was like, okay, outward behavior is a mess because of all these beliefs and desires. But what if we link a mental state like fear to something physical inside the body, like a specific brain process? The thing is, while that sounds smart, it's not actually a fix for behaviorism. It's a totally different theory. It's called type identity theory. So instead of saving the ship, he kind of just jumped onto a different boat and sailed away.
So while Hempel's approach hit a dead end, Gilbert Ryle came along with a totally different take. He didn't try to solve the puzzle. He basically argued that we were playing the wrong game from the very beginning.
This really nails the difference. You've got Hempel, who's looking at this circularity problem like it's a fatal flaw, a bug in the code that has to be patched. But then you have Ryle, and he looks at the exact same thing and says, that's not a bug, it's a feature. He thought the circularity actually tells us something important about how our mental concepts work.
See, for Ryle, the whole problem was that people were asking the wrong question. This whole hunt for a neat little list of behaviors for every single thought, he thought that was a complete misunderstanding of the entire project.
And this quote from Ryle himself really gets to the heart of it. When he says indefinitely heterogeneous, that's a fancy way of saying there's a basically endless variety of ways someone might act based on a single mental state. You could never ever list them all out. So the word fear isn't a label for one specific action. It's a shorthand for this huge, messy, open-ended pattern of potential behaviors.
And this is maybe the most important thing to get about Ryle. He wasn't trying to do science here. He wasn't a neuroscientist trying to find the fear part of the brain. He was doing philosophy. He was analyzing the logic of our language, how we talk about minds. So what Ryle's version of behaviorism boils down to is this. It's a theory about meaning. He's saying that when we use words like belief or fear, we aren't pointing to some secret thing hiding inside a person's head. We're using these words to describe a person's complex patterns of what they would do in different situations. He didn't solve the circularity problem, he sidestepped it by saying it was never about a direct one-to-one translation anyway. So let's do a quick recap. We started with behaviorism, this simple idea that your mind is just your actions. Then the circularity problem came along and blew that up,
showing how all our mental states are tangled together. Hempel tried to fix it by looking at the brain, but that just turned it into a whole other theory. And Ryle? He just sidestepped the whole mess by saying we were thinking about it wrong. It's all about how we use words.